Robert Clive Napper, who was born on February 25, 1966, is a convicted British serial killer and rapist who was remanded in Broadmoor Hospital indefinitely on December 18, 2008, for the manslaughter of Rachel Nickell on July 15, 1992. He was previously convicted of the 1993 double murder of Samantha Bisset and her daughter Jazmine. Robert Napper is the oldest child of Brian Napper, a driving instructor, and his wife, Pauline. Born in Erith, Greater London, Napper was raised in Plumstead, southeast London, in his early years. The marriage of his parents was violent. Napper witnessed violent attacks on his mother, which ended in divorce when he was 10. Napper and his siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, were placed in foster care and underwent psychiatric treatment. The psychiatric counseling Napper had at the Maudsley Hospital in Camberwell lasted for 6 years. Meanwhile, Napper underwent a personality change after a family friend assaulted him on a camping holiday when he was 12. According to his mother, the offender was jailed, but Napper became introverted, obsessively tidy, and reclusive. He also bullied his siblings and spied on his sister while she undressed. In 1986, Napper was convicted of an offense with an air gun and given a conditional discharge. In October 1989, police had rejected information conveyed in a phone from Napper's mother that her son had admitted to perpetrating a rape on Plumstead Common because no case matched the evidence. Still, it emerged at the time of Napper's second conviction that a rape of a 30-year-old woman in front of her children 8 weeks earlier had been reported to have occurred in a house that backed onto Plumstead Common. At this point, Pauline Napper broke off all contact with her son. On July 15, 1992, on Wimbledon Common, Napper stabbed the young mother Rachel Nickell 49 times in front of her son Alex, then aged 2, who clung on to his mother's body, begging her to wake up. Napper was questioned about unsolved attacks on women during the year, but was eliminated from inquiries. In November 1993, in the Bisset home in Plumstead, southeast London, Napper stabbed 27-year-old Samantha Bisset in her neck and chest, killing her, and then sexually assaulted and smothered her 4-year-old daughter, Jazmine Bisset. In her sitting room, the 6'2" Napper mutilated Samantha's body. The police photographer was off work for 2 years from the impact of witnessing the murder scene. Napper was convicted at the Old Bailey of the murder of Samantha and Jazmine in October 1995. He also admitted a rape and 2 attempted rapes at this time. Since the first Old Bailey trial, he has been held at Broadmoor. In December 1995, he was questioned about Nickell's death, but denied any involvement. Napper is also believed to be the Green Chain Rapist, who carried out at least 70 savage attacks across southeast London over 4 years ending in 1994. The earliest of the Green Chain rapes have been linked to Napper, and were those he admitted to, in 1995. Napper is known to have kept detailed records of the sites of potential and actual attacks on women. The investigation to find Nickell's murderer resulted in the attempted prosecution of an innocent man. Colin Stagg, before advances in DNA profiling revealed Napper's connection to the case. On December 18, 2008, Napper was convicted of the manslaughter of Rachel Nickell on the grounds of diminished responsibility. He also admitted to 3 other attacks on women. In his summing up at the Old Bailey, Mr. Justice Griffiths-Williams said to Napper, "You are a very dangerous man. Perhaps not since Jack the Ripper prowled the streets of East London has there been a killer as depraved as Robert Napper. Yet his name is hardly known. A flawed police fixation on criminal profiling that led to the jailing of an innocent man, Colin Stagg, for Napper's most notorious crime, the murder and mutilation of Rachel Nickell, denied the killer and rapist of his notoriety. The full horror of Napper's 5-year spree of violence, rape, and death can now, however, be pieced together. He was the Green Chain Rapist, terrorizing as many as 86 women in a series of sex attacks that escalated from indecent exposure to the knife-point rape of a mother pushing a pram. He was the man who, when the police attention came too close, crossed London to attack and kill Ms. Nickell as she walked on Wimbledon Common with her son Alex, then aged 2. As the boy watched, Napper stabbed his mother 49 times and mutilated her. And he was the man whose maniacal rage reached a crescendo in November 1993 when he broke into Samantha Bisset's flat, and stabbed her to death before sexually assaulting and smothering her 4-year-old daughter Jazmine. He then cut open Miss Bisset's body with macabre precision. Napper has admitted just 6 crimes, 3 killings, 2 rapes, and an attempted rape, and refuses to discuss any further cases with the police unless they can produce scientific proof of his guilt. Detectives will return to Broadmoor, where he has been detained since 1995, to question him about other offenses. His trademark was attacking young mothers accompanied by their children. Psychologists put it down to a childhood scarred by abuse and domestic violence. Still, detectives disagree and say Napper believed that women with children were likely to be more compliant to his demands. Robert Clive Napper was born on February 25, 1966, in a maternity hospital in Erith, southeast London, the first son of Brian Napper, a driving instructor, and his wife Pauline. His childhood was spent in a violent home until his mother sued for divorce when he was 10. Mrs. Napper's health deteriorated after the marriage breakup, and all her children spent periods in foster homes. Robert truanted and shoplifted and was deeply damaged when aged 12. He was sexually assaulted by a family friend on a camping trip. The teenage Napper was a reticent, obsessively tidy, lonely boy who bullied his brother and spied on his sister as she undressed. Napper is a classic case of abuse meets neglect, says Professor Lawrence Allison, author of a forthcoming book about the killer. Trouble at school, disorder, petty crime. He's losing perspective, drifting away from reality. After school, he pursued a series of manual jobs, leaving home at age 21 to live in a bedsit in Plumstead, southeast London. The Green Chain attacks, so named because of the proximity of the incidents to the Green Chain walking route, began around the same time. In November 1989, Pauline Napper phoned Plumstead Police Station to report that her son was claiming to have raped a woman on Plumstead Common. Cursory checks were made, and police told Mrs. Napper they could not trace any such crime. Had the officers looked harder, they would have discovered an unsolved inquiry into the rape of a 30-year-old woman in her home. A man with a knife attacked the victim while her children were at home. Today, the Old Bailey heard more details about his delusions and violent urges. Napper is a paranoid schizophrenic who believed he was untouchable and could transmit his thoughts by telepathy, the court heard. Victor Temple, QC for the prosecution, told the court that Napper had a propensity to stalk and or seek out vulnerable young women not known to him to rape, arming himself with a knife to intimidate and or control them. A psychiatrist who has been treating Napper in Broadmoor said that he also suffered from Asperger's syndrome. Natalie Pizzora said that Napper believed changes had been made to the calendar, which made him believe unusual things were taking place. Pizzora said that he was convinced he had an MA in maths, a Nobel Peace Prize, and medals from fighting in Angola. He and his family were in who's who, and he may well have had millions of pounds in a bank in Sidcup, Kent. Napper also believed that he could transmit thoughts through telepathy and had been kneecapped by the IRA and had had his fingers blown off by an IRA parcel bomb, but they had miraculously grown back. The psychiatrist said that his thought process was irrational, and he would have felt untouchable at the time of the murder on Wimbledon Common. She said she could not envisage Napper ever being let out of Broadmoor and that he accepted this sentence, which the judge confirmed today. He probably watched her for a little while. He would have walked towards her at first to check her face. Maybe he even smiled. This was the way Robert Napper stalked his prey before turning back to pounce on them from behind, usually with a knife at their throat. Sometimes, in the dark, he would spy on them for hours in what they assumed was the privacy of their homes. But here on Wimbledon Common, he selected his victim in the full glare of a summer day. Rachel Nickell was 23, blonde and beautiful, an ex-model and a devoted young mother. Napper had got to know the Common well, often cycling there or catching the bus from his home on the other side of South London. He was meant to be at work that morning but never turned up. At 10:20 a.m., on July 15, 1992, he had other business in mind. The only person who knows precisely what happened next is Robert Clive Napper, serial rapist, psychopath, monster. But the scene he left behind is seared into public consciousness as one of the most grotesque and baffling killings ever known. When someone stumbled across Alex, he was clinging so tightly to his mother's blood-soaked body they had to prise his hand away from her arm. "Get up, Mummy," he was crying. "Wake up!" Napper had slit her throat and stabbed her 49 times. Experts said delivering all the blows would have taken more than 3 minutes. Any of the wounds to her heart, lungs, and liver could have killed her. But he didn't stop. Many of the injuries were inflicted after she was dead. Others on her hands showed she had put up a fight. No one heard her scream. She was sexually assaulted and left half-naked. Her jeans and pants were pulled down to her ankles. The scrap of paper they found on her forehead, thought at first to have been part of some bizarre ritual, had been put there by Alex. He explained he had stuck it on like a plaster to make Mummy better. But what of her attacker? He must have been drenched in blood. He still carried the knife. Detectives calculated that if he looked around, he would have seen dozens of people crisscrossing the common. Among them, incidentally, the wife of Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Peter Imbert. Yet Robert Napper walked calmly away. Just as he always did. Just as he planned, and from that moment on, he disappeared into a black hole of anonymity. Quite what turned an angelic schoolboy into a savage sex killer defies a simple explanation. But there are pointers in his childhood. He was a solitary, secretive boy at Southeast London's Abbey Wood Comprehensive School between the late 1970s and early 1980s. Contemporaries said the greasy-skinned youth who dreamed of becoming an astronomer lived in a world of his own. Note that phrase. It would follow Robert Napper all his life. The home was desperately unhappy. Robert's mother, Pauline, and father, Brian, a driving instructor, clashed frequently and violently in front of Robert, his 2 younger brothers, and their sister. When Robert was 9, Mr. Napper walked out on his wife and family, later emigrating to Australia to become a fireman. Their bitter separation battle culminated in divorce just as Robert was starting secondary school. Interviewed by the Mail, Brian Napper struggled to comprehend what his son had become. He added, "I'd rather remember Robert as I had always known, him in his growing-up years, as a lovely little boy who gave no hint that he was going to walk down this terrible path. Perhaps I am partly to blame for nothing being done. My wife and I were having our problems at the time. After I emigrated, Robert used to write to me, but his letters stopped coming. We just drifted apart." Back in Britain, Mrs. Napper, a home assistant, was increasingly concerned about her son's behavior. He would hide behind doors to eavesdrop on relatives' conversations and then accuse them of making up stories about him. He was often aggressive, fought violently with his brothers, and repeatedly told lies. He liked to spy on his sister in the shower or while she was undressing. Once, while she was sleeping, she awoke to find he had pulled the covers back and was staring at her from the side of the bed. Fearing he was mentally disturbed, Mrs. Napper sent him for psychiatric assessment at the age of 11. After the first session, he returned home to declare with a grin, "The psychiatrist thinks I'm mad." The therapy continued for 6 years. It was discovered he had Asperger's syndrome. Mrs. Napper, now 65 and retired, told the Daily Mail she had reported her son to police after discovering he had stolen cash from relatives. They tried taking him to the police station, taking his fingerprints, and treating him as a prisoner, she said. The idea was to frighten him. It didn't frighten him a bit. To anybody outside, he seemed like a nice, normal boy. But behind closed doors, he was weird. Mrs. Napper remarried in 1987. Robert despised his stepfather and virtually refused to talk to him. Gradually, he descended into dark moods, reclusiveness, and, ultimately, to crime. A serious mental illness, paranoid schizophrenia, compounded the behavioral disorder. This toxic combination, as doctors described it, engulfed him. It manifested itself not just in violence but in bizarre delusions. Most significantly, it allowed him to convince himself he was supremely powerful and so skillful in perpetrating his crimes that he was untouchable by police. He came to believe he was a well-educated millionaire with a master's degree in maths, that he had won the Nobel Peace Prize, that he could communicate by telepathy. There does seem to have been a trigger for his transition to depravity. In a brutal encounter that his crimes would later echo, he was raped in daylight while walking in woods near his home. Napper, 12, was with two younger boys who were also assaulted. The year was 1978. His teacher said the attack made him dramatically withdrawn, turning him overnight from an unremarkable schoolboy into a robot. She told the male, he shriveled, up like a little old man. He couldn't get a reaction out of it. He didn't express any emotion. He sat there and did the work but was in his little world. In an English lesson, the class played a recording of a short story. Napper was entranced by it. He turned pale and started to shake and sweat. At one point, the teacher thought he was having a seizure. The story? It was The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. It describes how a madman commits a murder and dismembers the body. It's only Victorian fiction, of course, but years later, it would be chillingly mirrored in the grotesque killings that Napper perpetrated and in his detached, matter-of-fact demeanor under questioning. Napper had only average intelligence and didn't enjoy work. He left school at 16 for a catering course and flitted between menial jobs. When he was 18, his mother threw him out. His behavior just got too much and I told him he had to go, she said. The next time she saw him was 5 years later in October 1989. He was living alone in a shabby South London bedsit. He told her he had raped a girl 2 months earlier on. Plumstead Common. Although uncertain if he was lying, she phoned his psychiatrist in Plumstead Police Station. The police checked and found no record of anyone reporting an attack on the Common. Astonishingly, they didn't speak to Napper or make any further investigation. Had they done so and taken a blood sample, it would have provided a perfect match to the DNA he left on a woman he had raped at precisely that time. The 31-year-old mother, who used to sunbathe in a bikini in her garden near the Common, became his first known victim in August 1989. After the attack, he told her, "Want some advice? Don't leave your back door open." Within 2 years, a clear pattern would develop in a series of rapes and sexual assaults. The attacker became known as the Green Chain Rapist after the Green Chain Walk, a string of leafy pathways linking large swathes of southeast London. Perhaps significantly, one walkway went through the woods where he was raped as a boy. Detectives believe his hallmark is on at least 106 offenses involving 86 victims. He carried a knife and sometimes a rope or ligature for each encounter. In his bedsit, he also had a gun. Not that he needed it. Napper was 6'2" in and kept himself fit. His victims were almost all young, pretty, usually blonde. Every assault was needlessly and increasingly violent. It didn't matter if the mothers had children with them, which, for several victims, made the trauma even more difficult to bear. Just as terrifying was the realization that they had been stalked or spied upon. The Napper kept A to Z maps in which the psychopath I know I will never get over what he did to us. He plotted positions from which to peer into women's homes. One particular mark pinpointed an address in Plumstead close to his home. This was the basement flat where 27-year-old Samantha Bisset lived with her daughter, Jazmine. Samantha, an illustrator's daughter described as sweet and generous by relatives, adored motherhood, and gave up her drug-fueled New Age traveler lifestyle to look after her child. Just like Napper's other peeping Tom targets, she liked to sunbathe in her back garden, sometimes topless. She never drew her curtains. Even when she and her boyfriend made love in the living room, her balcony door was usually open on hot summer nights so Jazmine could get some fresh air. The following description details the most hideous murder that senior investigators can recall. The scene was so disturbing that a police photographer who recorded it could never do her job again. Its importance here is to illustrate the boundaries and human taboos that Napper coldly ignored. He jabbed at Samantha with a knife, then stabbed her 20 times in the head and neck. Perhaps mercifully, one strike severed her spinal cord. Others cut an artery in her neck and drenched the hall carpet in blood. She was sexually assaulted, probably after she was dead. Jazmine was next. Napper penetrated her before smothering her with a duvet. He left her dead on the bed, surrounded by her toys. She was 4 years and 3 months old. He wasn't finished yet. Slowly and deliberately, he dragged Samantha's body to the living room and arranged it on a cushion on the floor. It was the same position in which she and her boyfriend used to make love. Napper had probably watched them from the back of the flat, the exact spot marked on his A to Z. There were 60 stab wounds on Samantha's mutilated body. He tried to cut off her leg. He sliced her open and then pulled back her rib cage to expose the internal organs, which he pierced one by one. Remember the story of the beating heart? Experts believe he savored what he was doing, took his time, and kept his cool. His final act was to secure a trophy. Part of her abdomen was sliced off with a knife. Then he left. Samantha's stepfather, John Morrison, would later describe Napper as wicked and what he did as inhuman. "I know I will never get over what he did to us," he said. By this time, the fatally flawed Green Chain rape inquiry had already plodded to a close. The Plumstead Ripper investigation, which swung into action in its wake, however, was intense. It was a fingerprint from the massively complex forensic scene inside Samantha's flat, which eventually led to the arrest, in May 1994, of Robert Clive Napper, a 28-year-old warehouseman. Detective Superintendent Mickey Banks, the experienced detective who led the murder inquiry and oversaw Napper's police interviews, recalled that he seemed in a world of his own. At the Old Bailey in October 1995, Napper admitted manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility. Psychologists concluded he was grossly psychotic and constantly trying to conceal his madness. He was sent to Broadmoor without a time limit. Samantha's mother, Margaret Morrison, never lived to see justice. She died of a heart attack 2 days before the court case and is buried next to her daughter and grandchild. Her husband is convinced she died of a broken heart. Meanwhile, 16 years have passed since Rachel's body was discovered on Wimbledon Common, and 15 since a mother and daughter were slaughtered in their home. So, there is still one more question to ask. Need they have died? Everyone, even Robert Napper, must already know the answer.